Hello everyone, welcome back to Build a Better Adventure. This is actually filling out an encounter template. I talked about it last week. I said this week we'd be filling out an encounter template. Technically, it's still 6 p.m. Saturday for me right now, so we are filming this literally sliding into second base just to get the encounter template out. And we created this whole thing without knowing what the RPG game system will be, but we do know to use fantasy, and we'll explain how we came up with that in a minute. So for adventure development, there are a few things that I like to kind of prep before I do anything, and that is organize myself. On my laptop, I have a directory structure that's like building adventures, and underneath it, templates, and underneath that, just story ideas in general, and then underneath that, more completed adventures, and then each one of the adventures has its own directory structure so that as I come up with more things, I find an idea, I jot it down, and I just shove it in that folder so that we're building up our asset base for each one of the adventures. The next thing that is really important is just to make sure you're writing it down. I started the idea for this channel about 2 months ago, and in there I started going and walking my dogs and coming up with a whole bunch of adventure ideas, and then I didn't write it down. If you don't write it down, it never happened. So make sure you write it down, because I started with over 100 ideas. I only got 12 written down. It's not that the other ideas were bad. It's just a matter of when you don't write something down, you tend to forget what it was. So with 12 ideas written down, I've thus far filled out 6 templates, and I have now 4 adventures near finished. The biggest loss is when you have an idea and you don't get it down on in some sort of written form. Now that we're organized and now that we know we have to write it down in order to push it forward, let's start generating ideas. And for me, going to the park and walking my dogs is the best way for me to just start having my creativity go crazy. And I'll come up with anywhere between 1 and 3 or 4 different ideas of something I need to consider for adventure development. It's find that activity, find that person, find that place that just makes your creativity go wild. And then lastly, once it's written down, okay, so I generated this idea, I wrote it down, and I've placed it in a nice organization. Now I can return to it whenever I want and start embellishing it and introducing maps and creating stat blocks and knowing what game it's for, etc., etc., etc. So I have a desire to actually run a panel where we build out an adventure in an hour. And I'm hoping to do that at playthrough, but I don't know if we can. So I reached out to my various gaming groups and I said, I need some prompts, like an improv comedy prompt, to say, what should this adventure be about? And they said, well, how about you make it a fantasy married couple, that it occurs in overland travel, and you have to include undead somewhere. And I said, perfect. And I started to get right to it and fill out my little form. So I took about 15 minutes, well actually it took slightly less than that, to do everything I'm about to show you. I put it onto these slides, and I'm going to walk you through what was my creative process as I put together an encounter adventure. Okay, so let's fill out an encounter template. This is really all there is to the encounter template. There's nothing else. These are the fantasy elements that I need to consider. We'll keep going. Okay, so the very first thing I did was I went, let's give it a title. And I knew that it had an undead theme and a married couple. And I was just like, okay, how about the worst ghosts are the ones you create? Will that have anything to do with adventure? Don't know, but let's see if we can fit it into just another prompt that we would consider. So for the overview of the encounter, I stated, on a wilderness road, the party stumbles across a married couple that flagged them down because they just barely survived a bandit ambush. And I already know that the location is overland travel, and I'm going to state it's near a road, and I need 2 PCs right off the bat. I need a groom and a bride, and I just gave them names. I said Corwin's the groom, Talia is the bride, and before they got into this particular encounter, both of them wanted to be rich. And so I just kind of, in my mind, had them coming from wealthy families. But what if Corwin and Talia are the bandits? And in the process of the robbery, they accidentally slay the previous owner of the carriage, and the horses are taken out as well. Now Corwin and Talia have no way to depart with all of the money that they just acquired. And again, I've already declared that they're goal is to want to be rich. This still fits, so we're going to keep it. Now, Talia finds a wedding dress in the luggage and decides that's what they need to do. They need to pose as the newlyweds. However, this provides hints to your party that something is amiss because there's no churches around. Why is she going over such long overland travel in her wedding gown? And also, the clothes don't exactly fit, right? So the original victims, the Vertrums, were necromancers again before they were killed. I'm trying to include that undead section. So 10 minutes into the encounter, the party will have to deal with the Rhythm Vertrums. And I will try to come up with how that's going to all play out when we start looking at the goats for the Vertrums. So now back to the Corwin goat. Corwin and his girlfriend Talia robbed a couple on a road not knowing they were necromancers who would fight back. They are posing in their victims' wedding garments that they took from the carriage. They want to ingratiate themselves with the party and steal the party's horses and ride off with the Vertrum's treasure. Maybe they even want to steal the party's treasure, but that is a far from important thing as far as Corwin and Talia are concerned. Corwin thinks he's smarter than everyone, and this kind of encounter is a rush for him. He thinks by promising the world to the adventurers of, oh, if you help us get home, we're going to give you all sorts of riches and there'll be a reward, that the adventuring parties will do everything for him, even loading up their horses and giving their horses away to them. When we start thinking about goats, Corwin and Talia's goats kind of collide a little bit. They have very similar things that they want. So when we start looking at Talia and how she differentiates, Talia also wants Corwin. So this whole robbery going afoul and then her dressing up as a bride is almost a fantasy coming to life for her. And when we look at their particular tactics, neither of them will die for these goals, right? But Corwin will definitely kill a party member to succeed. Talia never wanted there to be violence from the get-go and will not die or allow Corwin to die for her goals of being rich and an additional married. The Vertrums, on the other hand, have very different goals. They want revenge. They want to slay their murderers, right? And the objectives change dramatically here. Because of their proximity to their luggage, and the Vertrum groom, Edric, mortally wounded but not quite dead, is siphoning off power before he dies to bring back his wife and the driver and any other guards that would have been on this particular outing with them. Now we're almost done, and they want revenge. Vengeance is the only thing on their mind, so they are pissed that they are dead. And their tactics, because of that, is they're willing to fight in their undead state until they are killed once more. And this includes Corwin and Talia definitively, but also your adventuring party, who I think they're going to mistakenly think are helping Corwin and Talia. So in the combats and challenges, there's multiple things that are going on here and a lot of moral decision making on how the party is going to handle this. But they need to see through Corwin and Talia's deception as well as deal with an undead horde, right? And maybe even Corwin and Talia, but that should be a very small fight as neither of them are willing to die for their end goal. But it opens up the door for your party to answer a bunch of questions, such as, what do we do with them now that we have them? Do we have to take them back? Do we take them back to the Vertrums? The Vertrums were necromancers. What's the right thing to do? A lot of open-ended questions and a possibility to actually fully flesh this out beyond just the encounter. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Please subscribe or follow, leave a comment, give a thumbs up, appreciate the video, and tell me how you would have handled these prompts, right? Would you have written a completely different encounter? If so, what direction would you have gone in? And secondarily, maybe leave me some more prompts and might do something like this in the future. I appreciate everyone watching. Have a good one.